So I want to now revisit Ghost Boys because we know this is a story that deals a lot with trauma and how communities handle trauma. So if you can have your stories out in front of you. I know we read part 1 of chapter 1 yesterday, and I want to take this time to reread it and then kind of explore the trauma that we find within it. So we'll get a couple readers to start us off. Terrence, you're going to be our first reader. And again, we're just going to focus on chapter 1, part 1 for now. And this is a reread from yesterday, where it says, "How small I look."
Laid out flat, my stomach touching ground, my right knee bent, and my brand new Nike stained with blood. I stoop and stare at my face, my right cheek flattened on the concrete. My eyes are wide open, my mouth too. I'm dead.
I'm going to pass around 2 different colored sticky notes. On the green sticky note, I want you to write down a question about the text. Write down a question about the text that you either have or you'd like to ask your classmates about. On the yellow sticky note, I want you to write down a question about stress or trauma. It can be connected to the text or just connected to the conversation we just had. I'm going to pass these around and just grab one of each. I encourage you to also look at our key terms on the back of our worksheet. Please take 90 seconds to develop a question. So we're going to start with a green question about the story. Green question about the story. Can you pass that down to Danye? Danye, can you grab a question out of there for us?
It says, why did Jerome get killed? Why
do we think Jerome got killed? Now, I think this is also partially a prediction question. So think about what the text says explicitly, and then I want you to use their prior knowledge about incidents like this of police brutality to think about why else might Jerome have gotten killed.
The reason he got killed was, like TJ said, because he was a young black male, and the policeman says that he had a gun, but he was 12 years old, and what we read from the text so far, he didn't really seem to be involved in their life like that. Especially because he was only 12.
I think he got killed because the police officers was assuming that he had a gun because he's black. They think that all black boys supposed to be in the streets with guns and more things. That's why they killed him, because of the color of his skin, and they assumed he had a gun.
Wonderful. So that assumption real quick, can someone look down at their key terms and let's look at that last term on there. Can someone reread that definition for us? Chantal?
Implicit bias.
Implicit
Bias. Attitude or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner.
Right, so that goes directly to what Kiani is speaking about right now. Kiani isn't saying we assume this cop is a huge racist who thinks these terrible, terrible things about all African American people. Kiani and Terrence also suggest in his answer that for whatever reason, the police officer made an assumption about Jerome based on the color of his skin, which demonstrates that the cop showed implicit bias in his actions, potentially, right? That's one of our predictions that's being made. Great job, Keanu. It says in our story why Jerome was killed. It says actually in the newspaper, Chicago Tribune. Look back at your story. We've kind of mentioned it, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Can I have a volunteer tell us, Danye? What's our story say is the reason?
The reason said that the officer said that he had a gun.
Now, did Jerome just have it, or does the story claim that he did even more than that? Look back at it's page 5.
Chicago Tribune. Officer, I had no choice. Jerome Rogers, 12, shot at abandoned Green Street lot. Officer says he had a gun.
So there we go. So it's claiming that he had this gun and the officer felt he had no choice. Why would an officer feel he has no choice?
I think the officer felt he had no choice because he saw Jerome running and he knew he wouldn't be able to catch him. So he just started shooting and he wanted to make it seem like it wasn't his fault.
And I think he said he had no choice because he knew it was no excuse for shooting a 12-year-old boy who was so little compared to a grown man.
He killed him because he thinks that every African American man with a gun on them will try to do trouble.
I think he had no choice because if someone running, he'll think that they did something that had run or they have something on them to run. I think that's why he said I had no choice but to shoot.
To elaborate on what Cornelius said, it's a saying that goes around that police shoot first and ask questions later.
I want to agree with Cornelius and all my other classmates said. I believe that he felt, after he found out that it was a kid, he probably felt some guilt. That's why he said he just tried to cover it up because he knew his consequences to his action. And he believed, I guess if the police officer was like, there's nothing else I could do because he thought he had a gun. But I mean, even in the text it said Jerome was like, he barely sprinted. So I don't really know what to say.
So now let's think about kind of connecting this to trauma, and we're going to get to our trauma questions here in a second. But thinking about this incident and raising silent hands, who are characters or people who now have experienced trauma based on this event?
His mother,
Okay, go one at a time because I want to see how many people. So we have mother, definitely experienced trauma.
The police officer.
The police officer. Cornelius, the friends. So any friends of Jerome's have now experienced trauma. Chantel?
His grandmother.
Grandmother. Right, we know he has other family members than just his mother.
the people who were taking videos and taking pictures.
Yeah. You were recording the video, if they saw it happen or if they arrived right after, all of those people, so the neighborhood has now experienced it. There's one group that we're missing. I want you to look back at your definitions. Think about when this story enters the Chicago Tribune, and think about when this story goes on the news or on CNN or whatever news station it appears on. Chantel?
All African Americans.
All African Americans. And why do you say all African Americans?
When something happens to a young African American male or just an African American in general that involves police, it puts more trauma onto everybody else and stress.
And then what's the specific key term?
Race-based trauma.
And can you remind us of the definition of race-based trauma?
When the experience of someone within your own race has a negative experience that impacts you mentally and emotionally.
All right, so now we see that this traumatic event is now impacting an entire community. Who else now might be impacted by the trauma if these people don't get treated for the trauma? So thinking about maybe that police officer. Maybe the police officer hasn't asked children yet, and he or she decides not to get treated. Who else now experienced trauma as well? Chantel?
Next generation, like their children, you know.
And what key term specifically is Chantel referencing there?
Intergenerational trauma.
What's the definition of intergenerational trauma?
When untreated trauma gets passed down by parents to their children.
So now this one specific event has created trauma for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. That if they leaves untreated will continue to be passed down to millions more people. So now with that kind of concept in mind, I want to shift our conversation to understanding trauma and stress a little bit more. And I'm not entirely sure what your questions have looked like in the yellow sticky notes, but we'll find out here in a second. Parents, can you grab a yellow sticky note? And this will be our question about trauma and stress today.
The question is, what kind of trauma will his community face?
Okay, perfect. So that's one thing that we've already mentioned most off, so let's try and grab another one.
Was the police officer experiencing implicit bias because he thought Jerome was a dealer, stereotype drug dealer?
Okay, so I want to do now two questions based on kind of the questions you asked. So let's first start with that understanding. Do you believe, based on your understanding of this story and previous incidents, that this officer was in fact showing implicit bias? Let's start there and let's give some evidence as to why.
Yes, because he thought that he had a gun. He didn't actually see a gun, and when he realized it was just a kid and he had no gun, he felt bad. So he didn't know because he stereotyped him. And if he wouldn't have done that, I don't think he would have pulled the trigger.
he definitely used stereotypes against Jerome to murder him, and I felt like even if this just is a story, it definitely relates to the real life that's happening. Victims like Freddie Gray and Eric Garner and things like that. So I feel like he definitely used that against him, since we have the stereotypes of drug dealers or murderers or violence in general. So yeah, I definitely think that's what he used against Jerome.
Well, another situation that involved implicit bias was the situation with Mike Brown. They thought he was the man that robbed the store and had a gun because they stereotyped him, basically put him in the same category as the man because they thought that he looked the same way as the man who robbed the store. And it seems as though in the news, the police didn't ask questions. They shot first, like they did with Jerome. I don't think they said to the little boy, "Let me see your hands." I mean, it's just a simple question could have changed the whole demeanor of the situation. Probably wouldn't have been the situation.